Okay, so the first thing about Baccarat is that you have to know when the cards come out, what hand's gonna hit and what hand's gonna stay and why. Okay.
Okay.
So that pyramid thing that I gave you, right? There you go. That explains when they hit and when they don't, right? So here's how it works. Like unlike Blackjack, not everybody is going to get their own cards. There's one hand for the player and one hand for the banker.
Okay.
All right. So it starts with the player; they get the first card, and then the banker gets the next card, and then player and banker. So they're always going to start with 2 cards each, and then depending on what the total of those 2 cards are, that's going to determine whether or not they take a third card. All right.
Okay, so wait, quick question before you go. So I've seen people, when they do the banker cards, they kind of lay them right next to the shoe right
Yes.
here. Is that fine?
Yes, they should actually be tucked under the shoe, under the corner of the shoe to start, and they shouldn't come out from under the corner of the shoe until you're ready to turn them over.
Okay.
Okay? So I was just showing you how it works originally with one card, second card, right? But it's actually going to be one here, the other one stays tucked there, then here, then it stays tucked there, okay? So every card in Baccarat counts as face value, except for your 10s and your face cards. Your 10s and your face cards count as nothing, okay? So this is a 2 and a nothing, so the total of this hand so far is 2.
Yep.
All right? So the player always gets their cards first, and they always open their cards first, okay? So here's a 3, and the face card counts as nothing, so this one is a total of 3. So depending on what your totals are is going to determine whether or not they get a third card. Now in this hand, 0 through 5 on the player will always take another card, okay? So if it's a 6 or a 7 on the player's side, 6 and 7 stand. If it's an 8 or a 9, either side has a total of 8 or 9 on the first 2 cards. That's a natural. The hand is over. Nobody gets any more cards. Okay? So in this case, a 2 for the player is going to take a third card. So we're going to take the third card over here, and we're going to turn it over. And now it's
8, right?
an 8 total, right? Your 2 that you already had plus 6. So that's a total of 8 for the player. Now, because the player has a 3, this third card is the factor whether or not they take a third card here. In the case of a 3, any card here other than an 8, the banker takes another card. If this card was an 8, it would be over, the banker wouldn't take another card.
Okay.
So it's not an 8, we're going to take one on the bank side. That's another 0, nothing, right? So it remains at 3. So the object of the game of Baccarat is whichever hand comes the closest to 9 is the winning hand. In this case, the 8 is closer than the 3, so the player wins the hand 8 points over 3.
Okay.
Okay? One of the most important things in Baccarat to know is your hit stand rules. Okay? So that's the pyramid, right? And when I learned the game, the way they taught me was 0 through 5 takes a card here, 0 through 2 takes a card here. Once we get into our hit stand rules, for a 3 is anything but an 8, they call it a 38 special. Kind of like the gun, 38 special, to help you remember it. If it's a 4, then there's 2 through 7 gets a card. If it's a 5, 4 through 7 gets a card.
I'm going to pause you. Okay.
Okay, I think I stopped at 5. So if this is a total of 5, it would be a 4 through a 7 to take another card here. Total of 6, if this card is a 6 or a 7, we would take another card here. On the bank side, a 7 always stands, and just like banker player either side, 8s and 9s are natural, nobody takes another card. Okay? So I'm just going to run a few hands and show you and explain to you as we go, and you can follow along on that pyramid chart as we go. Okay? First card to the player, second to the bank, third to the player, fourth to the bank. Okay, so face cards are worth nothing, so in this case the player shows nothing. Okay. Every card is face value. 8 plus 4 is 12. Now when you go over 10, because 10s don't count as anything, you're only using the second digit. So a 12 becomes a 2. So you've got nothing over here and 2 over here, which means that they're both going to get a third card.
Okay.
All right? So the player takes a third card and they are increased to 6. And the banker is going to take a third card and they have increased to 9. Okay, because it was a 2. 2 plus 7 is 9.
Okay.
So in this case, the banker wins because the banker came closer to 9 than the player.
Oh,
Okay?
simple enough.
Hmm?
Simple enough.
Yep. Yep. Alright. Player, banker.
Oh, you just shoot those cards like you're like so used to it.
Yeah. Alright, so the player shows 1, right? The face card counts as nothing, so there's a 1. The banker has a 3. So referring back to the pyramid chart, we're going to take a card over here because it's a 1. If this card is an 8, we're done. If it's anything other than an 8, the bank is going to get a card as well. Okay? So it is not an 8. It remains at 1. So the bank gets the card, and the bank increased to 7. So the bank increases 7, wins the hand 7 over 1.
Okay.
Okay? So on
It's more about memorizing.
it's all about memorizing when they hit and when they stay. Okay? And it might take a while for me learning the game. The hardest part, the part that took the longest, was memorizing to hit or to stay. Once I got that memorized, the rest of it is just muscle memory, how to pay, how to take the losing bets, how to pay in the order that you're paying it in. Okay? So the player shows 6, and they're gonna stand because on the player side 6 and 7 stand, right? So no more cards for the player. The banker has nothing, right?
Oh, this is actually perfect. This is a perfect scenario.
Right? So we stand here for the 6, but we're going to take a card over here because it's a 0. Okay? And that's another nothing. So the player wins the hand 6 over nothing. 6 is closer to 9. Okay?
Makes sense.
All right.
So here's my question.
Yeah.
Right? Let's say, because I'm looking at this chart.
Uh-huh.
Let's say like in this scenario they had a 6, they had to stand.
Right.
But the banker had a 4.
Right.
You clearly have to wait for this third card, but what do you do in that situation?
Okay, so in that situation, if it's not a 6 or higher, they're going to take a card.
Okay.
If the player stands on 6 or 7 and the banker has a 0 through a 5, they're going to take a card anyway, even though there's no card over here.
Okay.
Okay? So if it's 6-6, 6-7, 7-6, something like that, no more cards.
You just stand.
But even when the player stands, if the banker has between a 0 and a 5, they're going to hit anyway.
Okay.
All right?
Makes sense.
And then only if either side gets an 8 or a 9 natural, then that's when the whole thing is over and nobody gets any more cards. Okay? Player shows 5, right? Banker has 5 as well. So now, here's when our hit stands come into play again. We're going to take a card on the player side. This card here would have to be 4